There was a boy, halfway grown, skin all the brown his ancestors once carried. If you knew him, you love him quick, call him little bro, rest your arm on his shoulder and let your Saturdays become his new home. His voice wasn't heavy yet. It was still a swing on the playground, a game of horse, a do you like me, say yes kind of noise.
There was a girl, her skin a beautiful coffee stain, eyes deep enough to swim in but never drown. More inquisitive than most her age, she was always a question staring at the world for answers. She made most grown-ups prophetic. They would all say, this little girl gonna be a teacher, amazed at how her early mind worked.
There he was, breathless from playing house in the bottom of grandma's home, the basement, a hiding place for his cousins to run and wrestle and be all that puberty demanded, playing with a girl he knew. They went from basement to bathroom. He went from virgin to an open door, swinging with the sound of lust and lions readying themselves to devour every bit of identity he was never given. He sat, eyes wide and insecure, exchanging his body for hers there. Sex and syringe were made into metaphor. Her and every other body like it made into drug there. He thought he learned something new about himself. He thought her body gave him his first name. He thought her thighs could tell him who he was. He thought lust and love had the same hands.
There she was, barely 5, a tiny giggle on the playground, carefree and anxious for nothing except for more time at recess to make as much friends as she could. It was there when she first felt the urge to call another girl her own, where in her mind she replaced princes in Disney movies for princesses, and it felt right. It felt good and natural, like the breeze making her skin hush on a warm summer night. And then she was 6, still a small field of innocence, wide-eyed and growing into herself. On the lower level of a family friend's home is where her life began to bloom tragic. The room was dim, darkness tucked between each corner in the basement is where he named her his victim. Daddy gone, living somewhere coward safe, couldn't hear her heart trying to claw through her chest. So some teenage boy, his hands much bigger than hers, made her feel safe. And then confused, and then scared in a matter of minutes. That day, molestation made a mockery of her small body.
That boy became an almost man, addicted to the sound of his name in a woman's mouth. If you asked him if he knew their names, he'd describe their bodies. He'd tell his friends how he got her to get underneath him without God's well done and hear them open their mouths with praise. They pat him on his back and stretch their smiles at how he got so good at conquering pieces of land and planting his flag on foreign soil. That brown boy colonized bodies like it was his right to live in someone else's country, but he didn't know where else to call home. Every woman was a house and a hug and a I see you, you refugee of a boy.
That little girl grew up only making women her safe house. She would dine between their breasts while telling them all of her fears, and afterwards she would make a bed out of their torsos. She was now in a colorful world she can call her own, where rainbows were no longer a promise but freedom, from dark closets where she hid from the burning stare of church folk, far from that dark basement, and where she played out all she knew she was at recess. She was now gay, but the absence of true happy only someone sovereign can bring her often left her joyless.
After Jesus, I met him, a boy, Chicago born, built like a city of winded kings. Before him, the only people I'd ever loved were called woman. Women were to me a cathedral, beautiful and religious even. Their ability to make worshipers out of a secular born body was worth writing a poem for. While with them, I became unlike them, sagged my pants, flattened my chest, sat down, legs wide, as if I had something between them to protect my voice. Already a cello played with one hand made women obedient. They treated me like the man they wish men could be, but as much as I tried, I couldn't be what they were created for. Meeting the man God made to be mine was scary. To see him was to see the man named Daddy that came and left like he couldn't stand to see his face on somebody he didn't love. To see him was to remember all the men before him that taught me that trust ain't safe with nobody but God. But what happens when God is telling you to give your trust to somebody that ain't him?
When I met her, she was now a saint, and I had met God too. Our hearts knew as the wet earth when God first whispered the world into existence. Because of grace, I was now learning to see women as women and not bodies to lay my insecure. Most midnights I fought to enter into God's presence instead of entering into a woman to feel whole. Hard when your skin worshipped a woman's touch for so long. Hard when for so long created beings with soft hands held my broken instead of the God who made their hands. Silly how I doubted if his touch can make me feel new as theirs did. but she intrigued me. I heard her voice before I saw her hips. Her honest tongue and mouth ready with truth grabbed my heart and wouldn't let it go. God knew I needed a woman that I'll give my respect without her asking for it. 3 years of friendship was enough. I was ready for her to wear my last name.
Then we became one. When I said I do, I didn't know one flesh was literal.
As much as I wanted to hide
My shame and fears and failures, I had too many skeletons in my closet to act like I wasn't dead
Before,
before.
sex made me feel alive, but now my flesh had to die for another.
No one told me my wedding was also a funeral. My hands a casket for the flowers to lay. My dress a white lie. Couldn't the guests see all the dust I'd come from, all the dust I was going to? Couldn't they see the girls and the porn and the girls and the lust and all the things God set me free from? Set us free from the pride and the fear and all the things God put us together to make each other free from.
Is it a mystery how God's sovereignty magic tricked us from two sexually broken people and made us one flesh whole in matrimony
And made us holy. Identities now up to God to give, for God to define, for Jesus to see and tell us who we are. We are His and each other's. And ain't that a miracle? The process of turning two into one, unclean into forgiven, the visibility of God's voice when we became the Lazarus to whom He spoke. This boy, a man now, a husband, mine, he has been to me a mercy. Every new morning, I don't think of all the women He has known when we wake. I remember them as God does. Therefore, I forget them as God does. When they come to hunt us both, reminding us of what God buried, both His struggle and mine. We died together as promised. I live for all the ways He says, I love you without words. When He holds my heart with both hands, I say His name under my breath. You'd have to be Him to know what it sounds like out loud.
I promised God I would love her like fragile hearts can't break. He threw our past into a sea deep as mercy. How dare I dwell on the women she cradled before me when God gave us a right now love. Our marriage is not void of struggle, but when I see her, I don't see her sin. I see a song God is still writing. Every dawn she is cloaked in God's newness. She is a fresh scent on my tongue, a sweet residue left on my lips. When she leaves, I smuggle the memory of her beneath my breath. And when she returns, I kiss her soft, and all of nature begins to sing of God's goodness and how He made our love abstract art.
I vowed to do this. I took this woman, man, to be mine, to have it to hold. From this day forward, for better, for worse, for sexually broken or whole, in imperfection and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us.
I love you, Amy. That was so enthusiastic. I love it. I wanted to open up this section of the series with that because it's walked me into so much a space of truth. That, for most of you who don't know, is Jackie Hill and Preston Perry. They are a married couple who actually met through their creative gifting, and God has just catapulted them into a new level of using that to build the foundation of their life on. They testified a bit about their past and everything, and how they both came from sexual brokenness, and now they actually have 4 children and a dog, which is pretty cool. But I say all this to say that today I want to talk about how we come into our purpose as we create. We were breathed into and molded whole by a creator. He's trademarked by his otherliness, which is just another word for holiness. Holiness means otherliness. And we are most ourselves when we exist in the space that God created for us. Now, in Genesis 1:1, the first identifier that we have of God is that He is a creator, right? Because He created. And in Genesis 1:3, we learn that God created by speaking, because God said. And then so it was. He commanded, and then we saw what it was that His command created. By that we know that God is creative, which in its simplest form just means having the quality and the power of creating. God has been walking me through this revelation of creativity and creativeness and in His space as a creator and just running around inside me about the potential of our power as his sons and daughters to create things. Because we inherit the richness and the riches of God as co-heirs. In Romans 8:17, it says that we are co-heirs with Christ in God's kingdom, right? And he made us in his image. Now, I say all of that to say that God did what he did, and he is who he is, that we would be just like him. In Romans 11:29, it says, "For the gift and calling of God are irrevocable." Now, in context, that verse is there talking about the Israelites, the people of Israel, who God called his people. He said, "I will make you my people. I will be your God, and you will be my people." But at this point, Israel didn't want anything to do with God. And so he puts this there to explain that even though they don't want him, their rejection of God opened a door for all the Gentiles to have access to godly things, right? But God is saying here that he will not take away his grace gifts from the people of Israel because he promised it to their ancestors. And that came to my heart so sweetly because God has been reminding me in this last week alone of all of the things that he gave me when I was Israel. When I was a kid, I used to see angels. I didn't have any words for it, but I knew that there was something there that was meant to comfort me. I was never a good sleeper. I didn't like to sleep through the night. I was one of those kids that you could say was kind of scared of my own shadow. I walked in a lot of traumatic spaces, and so I couldn't be comfortable and I couldn't feel safe a lot of the time. But when I was younger, there was times where I would lay on my bed and I would look up, and at the top corner of my closet I would see this figure, and it was always like blinding white but soft because it was dark outside. And I would always say, "That's my guardian angel." I didn't know why, but I would always say that. And when I was in elementary school, I would walk around and, you know, if I was in someone's house or I walked into a basement or a certain space, I would actually see what now I know is demons. I would see these things and they would look disgusting. They would look evil. They would look like something straight out of a horror movie. And I would see them and I would fear them at first. And then there were certain ones where I would see them a lot. And I would see them kind of everywhere, and so I wasn't afraid of them. It was just kind of a normal thing for me in my head. But I was so little, I didn't understand, and God brought that back to me, and he said, "See, I gave you eyes for heaven. I gave you eyes to see the things that I see." Like, we always talk about the spiritual realm and heaven coming to earth. God gives us the eyes to see and the ears to hear the things that go on in the spaces that are surrounding us. Because it's not just about what's on this earth that we can see right now, right? And when I was 5, I really wanted to take piano lessons. But my mom put me in dance. And I didn't really want to. I didn't really want to dance, you know? And when I got so overwhelmed by all the things that I felt inside, all of the trauma and all the bad things, I started to write. I started to write poetry. I started to sing songs. I started to paint pictures. I started to walk around with colorful things, right? And there was a point in my teenage years when I was coming into college where I would tell people that writing, that poetry, that words, that all of these things, that they saved my life. And They did, because he did, but I didn't know that at the time. So I would just walk around and say, guys, like this performing thing, it saved me. Me writing down these things that feel like my insides are being ripped apart, this thing is saving me, because if I couldn't say it, if I couldn't share it, if I couldn't walk up onto this platform and give you all of the things that I'm holding on to, I wouldn't be here. And so I walked through seasons of my life that way. Seasons of my life where the only thing that kept me willing to breathe was that people could hear what I had to say. And they saw me, even if it was for the 5 minutes that I was standing behind a microphone. Right? And you know, I give all those small details and those little things just to say that, you know, God wanted me so bad that he gave me gifts that I didn't even want. He gave me gifts that I didn't even want because he understood that one day it was going to be so important for me to see how I look just like him. And that's where this series came from. That's where me tapping on the people in this room to share their gifts and to talk to God about how they're creative came from. Because there's so many people walking around who don't understand that all of this is the church. Every poem, every drawing, every song, every instrument, the way that we dance when we're all alone, the way that we laugh at the air, the colors that we see, and the way that our hearts rhyme, all of this comes from God, and all of it looks like him. All of this is a way that we can praise. It's a way that we can worship. And so God used these trials. He used my depression. He used my confusion with my sexuality. He used my lack of identity, as I would call it. He used me being abandoned. He used me being left by my family. He used me, the one that people called unloved. He used all of that to dig a foundation just to show me how much he loves me. And so whatever the thing is that you have, whether you see piano keys in your head or you can pick up any instrument and play it as if you've known it your whole life, whether it's taking pictures or painting or whatever it is, God gave it to you that you would know him. Not that you would just stand here and be talented. Not that you would walk into a space where you had a career of, this is my skill and I'm amazing at this. You might be amazing at this, but God doesn't give us gifts so that we would prosper in the ways of the world. He gives us gifts so that we can learn what they're for. And I never knew before this season of my life, literally, what my gift was for. You know, I used to think that I belonged on stages so that I could just like influence people and share pain. But there's hope. My gift was never for the pain, it was for the hope. It was for the testimony. It was for the gospel that keeps us. Right? It was for the positive things and the happy things. It was for the God that didn't make us puzzle pieces. There was like 10 years of my life where I walked around and I told everybody I'm just like a puzzle piece. Because puzzle pieces only belong where they belong. And I never felt like I fit. But even that was for the glory of God. I started this by saying that God is otherly. God is holy. So for every person who walks around thinking they don't fit and they don't belong and it doesn't match and it feels uncomfortable, you're supposed to. Why? Because God himself is set apart. God himself is other. He is otherly. That space where we can't belong to the things of this world is meant to show us who God is and where he is, because God is the only person that can put me in my place. And he does that for us. But when we believe the world telling us that we're different, and then we want to be the same, we cut God off from his ability to show us who he is because we're not willing. We want to find the way to fit ourselves, right? And in all of that otherliness that I felt from the world that said I didn't fit in, that said I was not loved, that said I did not and could not belong and I couldn't fit, I didn't even look in the mirror. It was a very special time in my life where I couldn't look at my face. But God wanted me to know that I only belong to him, because that's where we find our home. And we can find that in worship. And worship is not just when we sing. It's not just in the prettiest tune of that worship group on the TV. Everything that we do is a worship offering to God. When I stand here in silence, I am an offering to God. When I testify of his glory, I am an offering to God. When I cry next to him with no words to explain, I am an offering to God. When I welcome him into my brokenness, I am an offering to God. And I am worship. And this is why God says that we are the church. Because a building can't give me me. And a building can't make me worship, but God made me worship. Just like how Colby took her hands and she formed those mugs, she made them something. She took a vessel that came from this just wet, slimy piece of clay that turned into a box, and she turned it into something that had a purpose. God made us from scratch. He turned us into something that had a purpose before we could breathe. How cool is that? God dreamed about us before the world came into existence, before all the craziness and the politics and the everything that you can think of. God had a dream, and it was you. He had a dream, and it was you. It was you, Edwin. It was you, Juan Jose. It was you, Amy. It was you, Crystal, and Stephen, and Nicole, and JC. It was you. God dreamed, and it came true because you're breathing right now, that you can worship him. There's nothing that you have to do but breathe, because he says everything that has breath has the ability to worship. How does he know that? Because he made it. It's so cool. So, one of my favorite verses that God brought me to in this season of Revelation is Ephesians 2:10 in the Passion Translation. And I just want to put out there, like, as I'm speaking, I encourage you guys to listen, but if God is opening something in your heart, and if he's showing you something, go with him. If you have to walk away while I'm talking, or you have to write, or you just have to sit somewhere, if you need to cry, whatever it is, even if you're at home, you have full and utter permission to ignore my actual words and just go with what the Spirit is moving you to do. If he's showing you a vision of how he used to speak to you, if he is walking you into a moment of deliverance where he was there in a place where you never saw him, follow him. Walk with him, cry with him, be with him. Because if there's anything that I could want from what God has given me, is that we would all see who we are through what we already have. God didn't call you to go out into the world and learn 75 brand new things to try to get rich quick or try to be successful. He gave you what you need to fulfill your purpose. If it's too hard, if you can't actually do it, if you're walking in the wrong direction, if you're trying to force yourself somewhere that you don't fit, maybe you're not supposed to. Maybe you're the one who's supposed to change it. Maybe you're the one who's supposed to influence. Maybe you are the thing that's standing out to wake everybody else up. But don't force yourself into something that you don't belong to because of someone else's voice. Because anything that is not truth will sink. It will not stand. It is not a foundation. God is truth. He holds the truth. He speaks the truth. And if it's not him that you're holding on to force yourself somewhere, then Lord help you. Seriously. Ephesians 2:10. It says, does somebody want to read it actually? Ephesians 2:10.
We have become his poetry, a recreated people that will fulfill the destiny he has given each of us. For we are joined to Jesus, the Anointed One. Even before we were born, God planned in advance our destiny and the good works we would do to fulfill it.
Bring a mic. Now, I never read the Bible to see all the things that, that this version says. But the Bible actually talks a lot about poetry. There's actually a lot of poetry written all throughout the Bible. And it's funny that God is showing it to me now because, in all this time, it's like I walked into Christ feeling like there was no space for this gift. There was no space for my voice with this because the church didn't recognize it. The church didn't recognize that this was something that could be useful to God. And so for all these years, I silenced myself. I held back my voice. I stopped trusting the things that I had to say. But then I started to read the Bible newly, and God would bring me to these passages that we become his poetry, right? Even to the beginning, if we go back to Genesis, if we go back to the beginning, it not only says that God created and God spoke, but in Genesis chapter 2, we actually see the first poem in the Bible. We see Adam gushing over his wife, and he has a whole poem. And it's so funny because it's so simple. He says, bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. And it's like, whoa. Whoa. There's nothing else in existence right now but them, God, and the animals. And he had space to impart his creativity onto Adam. But we live in a world of people who love God, who don't see how that is him, and how that can break chains, and how that can deliver, and how that can open doors. I just want to take a break right now and just ask you guys, from that beginning poem and just up to this moment in the series, is there something that you are receiving or something God spoke to you newly, even just about this language or what you are, what you look like as a created one? Do you have something to say? No. You're just thinking?
Okay, I'll go. Um, I think the poem in the beginning was really powerful in the way of just like the execution of it and everything. Um, but one thing I will say about like the entire creative series is that I've been able to like. It's funny. I remember last week when Crystal and I we had taught. There was actually a moment where the Lord was just showing me like you need to continue to dance in your breakthrough. You know, like it's not just like this gift that you turn on and off, but it's actually a gift that is supposed to just flow like a faucet, right? So as much as like on in a sink we can turn on the water so it can go fast and turn it off. With our gifts, the Lord is actually telling us like it's just this the rivers of living waters that are in us is what makes us creative. And so yeah, I just felt like it was in this whole month I would say, you know, it's been beautiful to even see like the creativity explode in our young adults and seeing each and every one of you guys like be able to experience God from his creator aspect, you know, because I feel like sometimes we see creator as like, oh, he only made the moon and stars. It's like, exactly, he made the moon and stars. Like, how are you minimizing that or dimming it down to as if he created this chair? You know, it's like there's beauty and such a like you were saying an awe that comes with creating. And so um yeah, I would say that it was just it was beautiful to be able to step back into that. Okay, God, you're actually gave me this gift, like you said, right? You gave me this gift before I was even made in my mother's womb, so that means this gift sticks with me and I'm supposed to continue to use it. So yeah.
Yes.
Like Nicole said, the first video that you showed us was really powerful. It spoke about the past and how God can just turn something that's ugly into something beautiful. Like he can change it. And it made me realize like and he opened my eyes till now that like he is all powerful and all knowing. And it made me realize like we all have gifts. We all have different like gifts, whether it's singing, dancing, drawing, anything really. It's all made for him and by him. And it's sad to see when people think it's like you were saying, like they're proud of it, like have pride in what they're doing and is doing it's like, oh, like like their own God, basically. Using it for their own self-righteous, like, you know? And then they don't acknowledge God in it. And they're like, oh, where does this come from? And it's like, it came from God, you know? So that just opened my eyes, and I get nervous, I'm sorry. But, but yeah, it just made me realize that God loves each and every one of us. And that we just gotta really just trust him through the process, through anything.
Is there anything that God showed you or gave you that you didn't know was a gift to you?
That's so crazy. Like Nicole just said, dance every time. And I felt like God put in my heart, which I didn't know of because I'm like, oh, I don't really know how to dance. But he spoke that to me when I was home. He was like, dance, dance, dance all the time. Dance through your breakthrough. Dance, dance, because like, what's his name again? The one from church on Sunday? Prophet James. He was like, dance. When you dance, dance for me, he said. And I was like, wow, like that's just Holy Spirit just talking through him. I'm like, I feel crazy because I be dancing for him in my living room, and it's like, it like stirs up something in my spirit. And I know that in the spirit realm, the world that we don't see is like the demons. I know they're like trembling, and I just didn't know I had that gift. Like, okay, dancing. And once I was dancing, I was actually really dancing for him. I was like, wow, I never knew I had these dance rooms. But it was all His Holy Spirit. All the glory goes to God. And I'm just so grateful. Like, He's so good. Yes.
Anybody else want to share something? Yes.
I guess what I received through this whole creative series so far is that, well, what I've noticed also is that the more we go into the freedom of our gifts, you see the freedom in everyone else. Like, I don't know if you guys have noticed, but every service has just gotten more and more and more powerful.
Yeah.
So I'm just like so overwhelmed with like how much God is stirring up in our church and in just like our lives in general, that the entire church is gonna break into all their gifts, and we're all gonna be shocked that like, you know how to do that? You know how to do that? So yeah.
Amen. Yes. I love that. I love that. Because as a body of Christ, we inherit things, right? And we impart things, and we share the things that we have so that others can gain them. Because God is a relational God. And that's so cool. Sorry, my heart is so full right now. So I guess I will share with you guys, and I will preface this by God has genuinely shaken me today to not stand on my strength and my words and my talent, the things that I perceive. I tried so hard to prepare everything for you guys today, and God sat me still and made me move the way He moves. He only let me use the words He gave, and He cut everything else out. And as I have burned from the inside to make space for everything else, I'm just at a loss for words. So I want to share this with you guys. As I'm sharing, I want to challenge you guys to create something in this next 2 minutes. If God puts a tune in your head, or an image, a word, or a color, or anything, follow the ribbon to the end of the road. So of course this doesn't have a title. It's just a mixture of the revelation that God has been placing on me. With whispering with the Lord, inside voices, still and boisterous, joyous and whole, prepared for holiness, called otherly and His, called only for this because it's mine, and time to stand firm, stand obedient, stand chosen and open to the voice of my shepherd, wanting and wanted. Not wanton, but ready to be longing for a place where I belong. Untouchable, unchained, unquenched, and in joy, enjoying the breath of a holy celebration right here as heaven waves from beyond the torn veil, eyes wide open and ears to hear. I saw angels paint murals on my bedroom wall and didn't flinch to see the glory of my God honoring me like what he made has been worthy all along. As my life sing-song falls before him in all its imperfections, I am an expression of God, and when made on his face, I have no choice but be beautiful and unmoved by a darkness that could never exist inside him. The devil might be busy, but that's his problem. My heart burns where I belong because I yield to stronger hands. Gifting is not an expression of talent, it is an expression of freedom. This life is freedom practice. We stand to breathe free in a God whose light is willed and waiting to permeate everything. Be longing for him in endless streams of thought that always flow down a river that ever runs and never runs out. He is how. It is not a performance. This is home. This is worship. This is alone with my Father, my lover. This is bending to a will not my own. The war begins when I forget where this praise belongs. That this stage shines within, not for applause, but for abandon. I must leave me here for him, because hope on anything not truth sinks, and since freedom is my default, joy has no need to fight for a place where it belongs. When I am still in God, he can be moving. My stillness does not mean stagnancy. It is a fruit of his spirit to be patient in him, to wait on my Lord. There's no sweat off my back when I'm standing in my lane. See, the gospel didn't just save me, it keeps me. Now, something special about the poem that I shared at the beginning is that it wasn't just words for show. Those words walked through valleys to get there. God doesn't just call us to create of emptiness. He calls us to create in all of our seasons. If I can only create when I'm happy with God, then I'm still not sure who I am, right? And if I create in despair without the testimony of his goodness, then I still don't know who I am. God is the definer of who we are, and he chooses to refine by fire. So when we choose to go low, when we choose to bend, when we choose to surrender, when we choose to allow him freedom to move through us, we transform. The gospel isn't the gospel because it gives us salvation alone. The gospel is the gospel because it comes with a Lord. It comes with a creator. It comes with a father. It comes with a husband. Right? God is the bridegroom, and we are the bride. The gospel doesn't just come for one day and a happy story. It walks with us. The gospel doesn't die because Jesus is alive. He is alive and he is living. He yielded himself and he overcame death. He is alive. Our God, our Jesus, our Lord is alive. And when we create, we submit to a Lord who is alive. Something so special about a Lord is his lordship. So we have two choices. When we say that we know God and we choose to know God as Lord, there are two things that can never be in the same sentence. If God is my Lord, I cannot tell him no. If I say no to my Lord, then he is not my Lord. God has the authority over my life to make me, to mold me, to move me, and most to empower me to transform. When we transform from what we know to what he knows, we are going back home. How do I know that? Because in Genesis 1:26 and 27, God said, "Let us make man in our image." We walked away from lordship when sin came into the world, and we have a choice to walk back into it. But if he is my Lord and I say no, I'm not believing that he is my Lord, and I'm not willing to transform. And therefore, everything that I believe that God did not do for me is not his responsibility, because God will not finish something that he did not start. God placed something in each and every person in this room. God placed something in each and every person on that stream, every person that's watching live, every person that's going to watch later, every person that's going to watch years from now. He placed something inside of you. He gave you a gift. He gave you a grace gift. Why is it a grace gift? Because he gave it to you just because. He gave it to you without expecting reciprocity. How do we know this? Because the gifts of God are irrevocable. He gave it to you that even if you prosper without him, it's still yours. That's how great our Lord is. So if there's anything you take away from today, I ask you to ask him to show you your grace gift. And even further, to trust him in showing you how to use it. Raise your voice. Don't quench the spirit. Do not fear to create, because the thing that you can earn and learn in creation is that you look like your creator, and thank God that you're supposed to. I know this was very short, but I'm gonna cut the stream here just because I want to have a moment. I want to have a moment here in this place in intimacy. But I encourage you guys who are watching, run with him, walk with him, sit with him, cry with him, heal with him, and learn something new about yourself today from the Creator. Ask him, and he'll answer. So I hope to see you guys next week. Next week, we're going to have an amazing closeout to this series. And I hope that all of you would be available to see how the glory of God will fall here. We love you and we thank you here at True Encounter, and we'll see you next time. We good?